Lights flashed in the distance as my partner and I sped through the night, the wail of the sirens echoing off the buildings. Dispatch had just relayed a call about a bad accident, and we were on our way to the scene. The adrenaline kicked in as we weaved through traffic, my grip on the steering wheel tight. As we arrived, the scene unfolded before us like a nightmare. Mangled cars, their twisted metal frames testament to the violence of the collision. My partner and I exchanged a quick glance. This was going to be bad. I parked the ambulance as close as possible, and we rushed towards the chaos. People were shouting, some crying, others in shock. The flashing lights of the police cars illuminated the wreckage. My heart pounded in my chest as I took in the scene. We found a pregnant woman trapped in the wreckage of her car. Panic set in as I saw the blood on her forehead, the fear in her eyes. My partner and I quickly assessed the situation, radioing for additional help and equipment. We needed to get her out fast. The air was thick with tension as we worked. Firefighters used the jaws of life, cutting through metal with a deafening screech. Time seemed to move in slow motion as we carefully maneuvered her out of the wreck, trying to keep her as stable as possible. The woman winced in pain, her hands gripping mine with a desperate strength. Once she was on the stretcher, we wasted no time loading her into the ambulance. I could feel the weight of the situation as we raced towards the hospital, the sirens wail drowning out the chaos outside. My partner focused on navigating the treacherous streets while I worked on stabilizing her. The woman's contractions grew more frequent, and beads of sweat formed on her forehead. I could see the fear in her eyes, a mix of pain and anticipation. I did my best to comfort her, my words a feeble attempt to provide comfort. The hospital loomed in the distance. The tension in the ambulance skyrocketed. The woman's cries of pain filled the air, and my partner looked at me with a sense of urgency. We were running out of time. He pressed harder on the gas pedal as we neared the hospital. As we were going through a light, out of nowhere, a car ran the light and almost hit the ambulance. We narrowly escaped tragedy. A piercing scream shattered the confines of the ambulance. The baby was coming. I felt a surge of panic and adrenaline as I radioed ahead, alerting the hospital staff to prepare for an imminent delivery. I worked swiftly, guiding the woman through the birthing process in the cramped confines of the ambulance. He glanced at the rearview mirror. The hospital was now just a stone's throw away. The baby's cries filled the air, a fragile yet powerful sound that cut through the chaos. I felt a mix of relief and awe as I witnessed the miracle of life unfold in the back of our ambulance. The hospital staff rushed to our aid, their faces full of concern. We worked together to carefully transfer the mother and her newborn to the safety of the hospital. The chaos outside mirrored the chaos within, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the night was far from over. As I walked away from the hospital, the night air felt heavy with the weight of the unknown. Life, fragile and unpredictable, had unfolded before my eyes in a series of chaotic events. And in that moment, I couldn't help but wonder, how many more stories like this were waiting to be written in the pages of the night? We got a call to a quiet suburban house for an older lady who took a tumble in her bathroom. The moment we walked in, this smell hit us like a wall. I'm talking about the kind of stench that makes your stomach turn. It was like a mix of rotten meat and something ungodly. The flies. Oh man, the flies. They were everywhere. I mean, it was like a buzzing black cloud had taken residence in this poor lady's home. We geared up, put our masks on, trying not to gag, and we followed the trail of winged death to the bathroom. And there she is, this little old lady lying on the cold tiles, alive surprisingly, but she looks like she's seen better days. She's babbling something incoherent, and all I can think is, what the hell happened here? Then, about 5 feet away on the bedroom floor, there's a lump under a sheet. The atmosphere gets thick like you could cut it with a knife. We approach it slowly, pull back the sheet, and there he is, the husband. Dead as a doornail. Or more accurately, dead as a guy who's been lying in his own filth for a long time. The smell hits us again, stronger this time. My partner's face turns green under the mask, and I'm trying not to lose my lunch. It's not a pretty sight. From the state of decomposition, we assumed he'd been gone for weeks. Now you'd think that's the worst of it, right? It gets creepier. We get the lady on the stretcher, trying to avoid the swarm of flies, and we're heading to the hospital. The whole time she's mumbling something, and I figure it's just the dementia talking. Then she says, "I hope that nice man on the floor is okay." Hold up, what? We exchange a glance, my partner and I, and I'm thinking, did she just... But before I can wrap my head around it, she says it again, like she's genuinely concerned about the dead guy on the floor. In that moment, cruising down the road with this lady in the back, I couldn't shake the feeling that something isn't right. How does she not realize her husband's a corpse? We get her to the hospital, hand her off to the staff. The whole time I'm trying to process what I just witnessed. The lady's alive, but she's living in a whole different reality. Later, I find out the details. The husband was the one taking care of her, and when he keeled over, she just kept on going about her life as if nothing happened. Then one day she was trying to get off the toilet when gravity decided to give her a big old middle finger. I can't explain that lady's words on the way to the hospital. Maybe it's the dementia playing tricks on her mind. But I'll tell you this, it's a call that's going to stick with me. Sometimes the things you see on the job are stranger than fiction. I threw my backpack into the ambulance, its red and white lights reflecting off the grimy pavement. It was another night shift, another call. My partner, Jake, was already inside, fiddling with the equipment. The dispatcher's voice buzzed through the radio, telling us to head to 15 Elm Street for a suspected overdose. No surprise there, it seemed like half our calls were ODs lately. We sped through the silent streets, the city wrapped in an eerie stillness. The address led us to a rundown apartment building with flickering streetlights. We climbed the creaky stairs to the 3rd floor, following the acrid scent of something burning. I knocked on the door and it swung open with a reluctant groan. Inside was a scene ripped from the darkest recesses of your imagination. Dim lights barely illuminated the cramped space, cluttered with empty pill bottles and scattered drug paraphernalia. A guy lay sprawled on the floor, eyes rolled back, and a sickly pallor to his skin. The air hung heavy with the stench of desperation. Without wasting a second, we went to work. I crouched down to assess the guy, my gloved fingers searching for a pulse. Weak and erratic, not a good sign. Jake was already preparing Narcan, the life-saving antidote to opioid overdose. I administered the drug, praying for a response. The room held its breath. Nothing. Suddenly, the guy convulsed, gasping for air as life flickered back into his eyes. The room filled with a collective sigh of relief, but it was short-lived. His eyes darted around wildly, confusion etched on his face. He glanced at us as if seeing monsters, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were in the lion's den. We picked him up and secured him on the stretcher, the creak of the wheels drowning out the background noises. As we loaded him into the ambulance, his gaze never left us. I could feel the weight of his eyes on me. Inside the ambulance, the atmosphere turned oppressive. The overhead light flickered, casting eerie shadows on the guy's face. He started muttering to himself, words mumbled and incomprehensible. I checked his vitals, trying to focus on the task at hand. "Where am I? What did you do to me? Let me go." The panic in his voice was palpable, but we chalked it up to the disorientation that often followed an overdose. I tried to reassure him, explaining that he had overdosed, and we were taking him to the hospital for further treatment. His eyes darted around the ambulance, searching for an escape that wasn't there. He thrashed against the restraints, his strength surprising for someone who had just been on the brink of death. The radio crackled with the dispatcher's voice. We gave them an ETA so they could be prepared for our arrival. I glanced at Jake, concern etched on both our faces. The guy's agitation escalated, and he fixated on the radio. "You're lying! You're not taking me to the hospital! Let me out!" His accusations were laced with desperation, and the more we tried to reason with him, the more convinced he became that we were orchestrating some sinister plot to kidnap him. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor echoed his erratic heartbeat. The suspense hung thick in the air as the ambulance raced through the empty streets, each passing moment amplifying the tension inside the confined space. The guy's struggles reached a frenzied peak. He managed to free one hand, and in a split second, chaos erupted. The stretcher rocked dangerously as he swung wildly, connecting with my jaw. Pain shot through me as I grappled with him. Through gritted teeth, he hissed, "You won't get away with this!" The gravity of the situation hit me. We were minutes from the hospital, alone with a man convinced we were his captors. I shot a quick look at Jake, silently communicating my concern over the situation. I finally restrained him again, securing every limb. His eyes bore into mine, a mix of fear and defiance. Despite the sedatives we administered, he fought against the chemical restraints, his struggles growing weaker but never stopping. The suspense reached its peak as the hospital loomed in the distance. We pulled into the emergency bay, the harsh glare of the lights contrasting with the lights inside the ambulance. "You won't get away with this," he kept screaming. The medical staff rushed to meet us, their faces a mix of confusion and concern. We handed over our agitated patient. The guy continued to glare at us, his accusations echoing in the sterile air. As the hospital staff took over, we stepped out into the cold night. The suspense lingered, the unanswered questions hanging heavy in the air. What had triggered such a violent response? Was it the overdose? As we drove back into the night, the empty streets seemed to hold the secrets of the darkness. The radio crackled with the next call.